I'm going to invite Bill Bowen to come forward.
My name is Bill. I joined this conversation in 2010. I'm in this congregation, but I've never felt I've been of it, and I'll explain that. I've been in the Methodist Church 70 years, which eliminates some of you, but a few of you beat me. And I found in this church something I've never found in all the churches I've ever been a member of before. I've found a place, and I've found a history. And these words are really meant for those of you who have not been a part of that history and this place so long. Now, in 2010, I did meet several of you. I met Andrew. Andrew was a second grader, and he was the old kid in the Sunday school class that we had. I remember that very well. A particular joy, Andrew. When I came here, the first thing I noticed was the garden, and the garden is much discussed. The garden represents something that I think many of us do not fully appreciate, and that is the tremendous sacrifice that a generation of these church members, now all past for the most part, what they gave of themselves to this community, to this church, and to this nation. We have a slideshow, and if I could ask Butch, could you put up the first one? Now, I'll warn you, I was a professor for 35 years. So you may want to close your eyes, put a smile on your face, pretend you're taking notes, and I'll appoint Rick Lewelly to have a white flag to begin flying it in a few minutes. I'll also note that this is an unnarrated, musically accompanied video on YouTube. And I've sent that link out to those of you that do have such a link, and I've asked Butch to run it after the service is completed for those of you that do not. I'm here today representing the Endowment Committee. The Endowment Committee has several tasks, joyful tasks. And because the entire endowment group is being seniored out, we've all served our terms, I would encourage some of you to think about what fun it would be. What fun it would be to serve on this particular committee, because we do not wash dishes, we do not mow lawns, we play with money, and that is a wonderful task. Now, the first thing I thought of when introducing this was a good symbol for this church is the entry to the garden. Next. And I would remind you that we do have a luncheon coming up, Living Treasures. It will be on June 5th, and I want to see all of you there. I'm a professor. I have a roll sheet. I will check you, because it is a grand affair. Next, Butch. First of all, the financial report. Next. When I was a young, struggling student at Berkeley, I had the bad fortune to meet for 2 years a succession of professors who are infinitely forgettable. And on one day, when I decided, at the spur of the moment, to change my major to something useless, I was invited into the office of I didn't know it, world-famous retired professor who spent the entire afternoon with me. And the first question he asked me was, "What is your name?" Yeah. He then said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Bill Bowen." And he said, "That's just a label. Names are labels." And what I want to show you are the faces behind those labels. One of the endowments is the Rusty Arutsu Endowment for Scholarships, and that is what we are celebrating today. This is a gentleman that is startling if you begin to look at the history of this church, the things that he did for this place. He wrote one of the histories, which I would encourage all of you to read. But look at what he's done. An initial gift that has provided scholarships for 77 students up to today, but not including today. And look at how the investment, you do not have to be an investment advisor to deal with this. It is all done by the conference. Look at the results. An investment in money, an investment in time pays great dividends. And I encourage the young people to begin thinking about that. Life is not for the consumption for personal pleasure, but it's, in addition, the investment of a life to return great returns, many times over, to those that follow. Next slide. This is Garland Welsh. She left a chunk of money to the church too, an endowment. You can see this image because part of that endowment was used to pay for part of that projector. $11,000 this year. You didn't have to do anything to get it. She did it for you. Next. And here's a gentleman, Shiggya Cody. He was a trombone player. Played trombone here as a kid. He was also a member of the single most famous infantry regiment in the history of the United States, the most decorated, and when studied by historians, considered to be the finest regiment. He is the sort of person that was with George Washington at Valley Forge. He was that little round top. He and his companions were the people that helped save this nation. Recently, his estate donated $100,000. This particular donation is for unsupported yet necessary activities to support the elders of this church. So the first is for the young, the most recent is for the old. And in between, we have Garland providing for the needs of the church, capital needs. Next, please. Not a part of this matter of the endowment, but someone that should be recognized, is the Kaketa family. Coco used to work at Sierra College. And because of her closeness to the students, she hoped, and her daughter Janice have given scholarships to students here who have gone on to Sierra College. Now that's something to think about too. Next. So we've been talking about treasure. But what is treasure? I was asked once at the university what I thought a university should be. I said it should be a treasure box. A box into which a community can come for all those things that are essential to its survival and for its success. So let's look at what I happen to think the treasures of this church are. It is the buildings, oh, not this building, well, part of this building. This is a photograph taken about, 50 years ago? It's not this building. It's this building plus that's what we had added. This was the modern church. But I think the people are the real asset of this church. They always have been the treasure. This is George Makamoto's family. And one of the things that struck me about this church is it's almost biblical. I've never been to a church whose members experienced the Exodus. There was an Exodus from Japan. They came here to the New World. I never have been in a church where the entire people of this nation were led into captivity. This church was. It's incredible. The restoration, and then the scattering. There are very few of the families left because they believed in raising children that would be successful. And can you be successful on 15 acres of orchard today. They went out into the world. Next. Tule Lake. Well, if you go there, there's not much to see. Go to Manzanar. They've been rebuilding it. Most of this church went to Tule Lake, I'm told. A unlucky few went into the 442nd. There's Shig in the middle, the short guy. Never judge a person by their height. I'm tall, so I'm supposed to be good. Nah. Short guys, look out. They're the treasure. Next. There's the record of that particular unit. 2 years of service, 7 presidential unit citations, go on down, 18,000 decorations, 21 medals of honor. How in the world did they do that? They did it with determination and courage. When a Texas division lost a battalion in the south of France and could not get them out, these people were sent to get them out. They suffered 600 casualties, getting about 150 Texans out. Incredible. But why so many? I'll have to give you a downer for a moment. The theater commanding general made sure that this crack unit was always out in front because he wanted to eliminate them. Okay? And they understood that. The commanding officer of that unit later would not shake hands at official events with that particular general. These people came back. Next. There they are. Next. Here they were. Next. A prayer meeting. I found this interesting. A prayer meeting. Have you been to a prayer meeting here recently? They don't look like that. This is a prayer meeting on January 11th, 1953. Next. A prayer meeting with bulldozers. I love that. A group of parishioners that will show up with tractors and bulldozers to do the work of the church. Next. Here's Rusty Arutsu. He's the guy that left the money for the kids. Next. Here's Alnita on a bulldozer. There are all sorts of Alnita bulldozer stories in this congregation. Next. Well, you can see the congregation up above and the management down below. Next. Here we are a year after they start. They literally built this with their hands. I didn't include a lot of pictures which show the women of the church up there painting. Next. But the key of any church, we all know, it's women. And here are women, only one of it, which I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Lila. She is that connection point that is still with us. Next. How about Carol and Betty? Next. Very few of us were here then. You were. Next. Well, is Craig here today? Yeah. What do you think, Craig? A long time ago. But yet, it was just like a blink of an eye. Next. Oh, yes. I'm told that they were called the sweet and sour notes. Next. Here they are. I'd call it sort of a murderer's row in some ways. Polly, there you are. Next. I've taken leave to go back and look at church directories, and I've circled people so we can see Janice and Scott sitting there. Is Sumi here today? Well, she'll see this. But the people in circles, well, there's Jerry and Barbara down there, Campbell. Yeah. You should look at these books, and the books haven't been available, but Sarah Nita's trying to get this together so we can get in touch with the reality of this congregation. Next. There's Betty again. You still here? Well, there he is up there in the circle. John, Nita? Yeah. Here's the congregation in that transition period. If you get close enough, you can start to play Where's Waldo. There are the Iwasakis right in that circle there. Next. About 20 years ago. Next. Now, there is a mistake that many of us make. We think of history as way back then, but history is now. History is now. And if you want to make history, you make history now. These are the people. Well, how did I select them? They were the people willing to smile. I think of this church as being filled with treasures. Really filled with treasures. Next. And this, if you're not in this slideshow, you better smile from now on. Next. John's dad's on a tractor. John's been on a tractor much of his life. John's over here with many others feeding the poor. Next. 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 Well, we do memorialize these people. We put their names on plaques, and for new people, I didn't know who these people were. And the plaques have been locked up in the building for a couple of years on top of that, and that's why I'm taking so much of your time today. Next. The current roster is 2 years old. We'll have to update that. Next. The Wonder Women. Several of them are still with us and working like crazy. Next is the Living Treasures. But I had never seen a picture of Sarah Bailey until I was given this task. Well, it's not a task, it's a gift. Next. And these are the Living Treasures as of 2019. Now, the committee got together and spoke to a number of elders in the church, and it was our notion that we shouldn't let a mere plague defeat this church. After all, a world war didn't, so why should a plague? And we've determined that there will be named this year Living Treasures for 2000, 2021, and 2022. This is a bit different. Next. Now, for those of you that are not aware of what an official living treasure is, first of all, you've got to live a long time. And you have to be here a long time. And you have to do a lot of work for a long time. And a lot of people that do that somehow slip through the cracks. The committee had an issue, me of course, because I didn't have the background to do it. So I went and talked to many of the Living Treasures and asked them for names. I figured the best place to go is to those that have lived it. And these are the names that they came up with. Crystal Linton. She came to this church in 1972. She joined in 1973. And repeatedly people said, well, you know, the Golden Girls, the Cottonhead Group, the Red Hat Girls. You know, the most dangerous words in any organization are, you know. I don't know. When I went to talk to Crystal about this, her comment I thought was quite interesting. She said, oh, but that's an award for young people. She celebrated her 99th birthday this year. Next. Some of us see people at work all the time, and others make a church go, and maybe go in interesting directions. When Fred and Axa Hitchens came to the church, Pam Cummings, I'm told, asked them to look into the issue of the Senior Life Center, and they did, and they took it on as a mission. During their time leading this, by my calculation, they probably raised, independent of the church, they went out and raised about $200,000 to support it. That's a picture of this church down below on a rainy Tuesday morning. You go around to the churches in this district and see what's going on in the parking lots on a rainy winter morning on a Tuesday. Nothing is going on. But this church, building upon that educational unit that was put up in 1953, has a very active, wonderful preschool. And because of the work of Fred and Axa, those cars down there on the left, that's the Senior Life Center. And because of others, we have cars going on into the back to find food for themselves and their children. So Fred Hitchens is another living treasure. Next. And of course, by universal acclaim, Barbara and Jerry Lewelly. They've been here not quite a half century, but they've been active in almost anything you can ever imagine and can't imagine. And I find, as an outsider, who is a member but not inside, that Jerry is a very interesting person because of his sweet and sour note early work. He has become, in a sense, a spokesperson for the congregation. Jim Makamoto requested many, many years ago that when he was laid to rest, Jerry sing. Jerry has touched the hearts, as has Barbara, of so many people in this congregation, and guess what? He's going to do it again today. Never-ending service. That is the treasure of this church, its people. A minister once told me, excuse me guys, a minister once told me that, ministers, we're temporary. We come, we go. But the congregation endures from generation to generation. And with that in mind, I would hope that you would congratulate the living treasures that we've offered to you today. Jerry, would you stand up? Okay, now I want you to hold your applause for a moment. Don't sit down, don't sit down. Fred, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for all that you have done.
Thank you.
I don't see Crystal. I'll have to go and embarrass her this morning. Thank you so much for your patience. Where is Barbara? Barbara. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. Now I will shut up.
How many people in this room wish that they had Bill Bowen as a professor? If you would ever consider doing United Methodist history and doctrine, I promise you there would be way more pastors in the United Methodist Church. Thank you, Bill. That was so wonderful. And what a perfect day for us to celebrate our young and our old. And no pressure, but we know that you guys are going to be up there someday too when you're 80 plus. Whether it's here or another organization, we know that you all have what it takes and that you're service-minded people, and we're just so proud of you and excited to celebrate you today, as well as our living treasures. Jerry, I'm just gonna, where did Jerry go? So I also want you to sing at my funeral, please. So.